Welcome back to the channel, you curd nerds. We've got yet another exciting mock check ride for you. Now, this one, this is what it looks like to be ready for a check ride. Not only was the student knowledgeable, but the student was confident about what they knew. And if they didn't know it, they knew where to find the answer. This is exactly what it looks like. But before we get into the mock check ride, got a little message from a sponsor, right? These lights don't pay for themselves, so check out the sponsor and then enjoy the mock check ride. So the sponsor for today's video is actually a ground school provider. And I've had some students reach out saying, hey, Cheese Pilot, we would love a ground school built in your teaching style, your training style, you know, how you break it down Barney style. But I'm going to be honest, I don't have the time or resources to build one that I think would be quality enough to sell. It's a one-man crew here, right? There's nobody behind the scenes. There's nobody behind the camera. It's just me here. And I really just don't have the time, tools, know-how, or resources to build you a ground school that I think would be adequate. Which is why I've partnered with Pilot Institute. I've looked at the other options that are out there. I've talked to the other providers of ground schools. Some of them are just dated. Some of them don't go into the detail that I would expect. But Pilot Institute kind of checks all the boxes that I really think are needed for a quality ground school instruction. Of course, I always recommend going through your ground training and your flight training concurrently, just so that you can kind of make those connections from what you're learning in the books to what you're learning in the air, right? Makes a little bit more sense that way when we cover systems. Then the next lesson, we go and do a bunch of emergencies that are related to systems. That's how I teach. But I also understand that everybody's got their own financial limitations. Everyone's got their own financial situation, their own learning styles. And an online ground school might be the best option for you. So I definitely recommend Pilot Institute. We got a couple different options here. We got private pilot made easy, instrument rating made easy, and even a drone certificate if you want to go fly drones. So head on over to trainingwithcheese.com, click up there, ground school, and go sign up if you want to get your private pilot or your instrument rating or even your drone certificate. Now let's get into the mock check ride. All right, so now I got to ask before I go any further, are you okay with me using this or recording this mock check ride to use as, content for whether it be Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc.?
Yeah, yes, sir.
All right. So Dylan, we're working on a private pilot mock check ride in a 1960 172. So, what can you tell us about how you got to this point? How many hours are you at? How have you enjoyed your training? I guess recently, how many instructors have you gone through, since that seems to be what's happening in a lot of times now?
Yeah, well, so far I've gone through 2 instructors, but 2 years ago I used to try to go for my privates, but I got maybe around 8 hours in, and then I stopped for the 2 years, and then now I just now got back into it. And so pretty much 2 instructors of what I've had, but I have roughly now 28 hours now, and kind of diving down a lot faster and harder than 2 years ago.
Awesome. And I mean, 28 hours, that's not a whole lot. I mean, have you gone through like the cross country training yet, or?
I have done 1 cross country, and I'm actually about to do a cross country right after this.
Oh, awesome.
The 150 nautical mile.
Awesome. Are you excited?
I am.
All right. Well, what I do is I go through a little script. I don't know if you've seen the full mock check rides over on YouTube, but I have a little script that I go through that pretty much any DPE is going to use as well. And it talks about the 3 different outcomes of a check ride, right? We've got satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and incomplete. Satisfactory is you're consistently within the standards. Perfection is not the expectation, though. All right. If you don't know the answer, admit that you don't know the answer. Know where to find it, though. Okay. When it comes to the actual, physical portion of the check ride while you're actually flying the plane, if you're making a mistake, acknowledge the mistake, say it out loud, say what you're doing to correct it. If you end up 50 feet low or 10 knots too slow on a steep turn, say 10 knots too slow on steep turns. I'm applying another 200 RPM to correct for it. Okay. Just announce it. Because if I'm sitting over there in the right seat and I don't see that you've made a correction, I just think that you haven't even recognized that there's a mistake, which is a problem. But if I can tell that you've recognized a mistake, you apply a correction, and that correction gets you trending in the appropriate direction, all right, it's better than just making a mistake and saying, well, fuck it, let's just make the mistake. Right? When it comes to unsatisfactory, right? That's something nobody ever wants to hear, but it means that you're consistently outside the standards. You're a danger to the national airspace system at your current training level. You are, as I said, consistently outside of standards. You have to look up every answer. You don't know how to respond to, basic things like fires and spin entries and whatnot. Damage the aircraft, hurt somebody on the ground, damage another piece of property, right? Pilot deviations. Then we've got incomplete. Incomplete is all the reasons for an incomplete. You can find it. I think it's the regulation 6143 Bravo. And it's things like weather, aircraft airworthiness, illness, ran out of time. Student showed up unprepared is not an appropriate response for an incomplete, right? Student showed up without their logbook. Student showed up, with no cross-country plan done. I mean, you laugh, but when I did stage checks for UND, the amount of students that would show up with just like nothing. And I'm like, what are we doing here? So just keep all that stuff in mind, right? And then they're going to go over all your documents to make sure everything's in order. So what documents are you going to need to bring to your mock check ride, or not your mock check ride, but your actual check ride?
Well, I'm going to have to do my photo ID. Since I'm still a student pilot, I'd have to bring my logbook with all the certain endorsements. Have to do my third class medical, but I have a first class medical in that case, and then my pilot certificate.
Awesome. Now, make sure all your endorsements are correct. I know even as an instructor, I've been teaching for almost 10 years. I still make a mistake every once in a while on what endorsements need to be in a book. So the advisory circular is 6165 hotel. If it's not hotel anymore, then it's just the next letter down the alphabet. All right. The appendix all the way in the back is all the endorsements, and it breaks it down Barney style. All right. Okay. So awesome. Last thing a DPE might ask is, have you read through the ACS and you understand the standards that you're being held to?
I have.
Awesome. Awesome. That's what I've seen a lot of students struggle with is they end up at a big school. They end up, their instructors kind of holding their hand through their training, and then they never reference the ACS. And then they get to the check ride and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be on the check ride. It's like, well,
wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's in the book. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. Right. So awesome. Remember though, it's your check ride. You need to take a break. You need to go to the bathroom. You need to get a snack. Say so. Speak up. All right. Same thing. If when you go fly, the weather is outside your personal minimums, say something. Okay. I have brought cookies to pretty much every single one of my check rides. Am I bribing DPEs? Maybe. But but they help, right? If you're struggling, you need to pump up your blood sugar, get your brain functioning again, right? Awesome. So what I like to do is I dig into systems first. And again, given that your airplane is, what's the best way to put this? Up there in years. It's going to be a little interesting, actually, trying to really dig into systems because there's not a whole lot in your POH.
No, yeah.
All right. 1 second. There we go. Problem solved. Awesome. So what engine do you have and what can you tell me about it?
Yeah, so I have a Continental O300A that's producing roughly 145 horsepower, give or take with this age. It's got a carburetor. Really not too much about it.
No, I mean, it's awesome. It is a 6-cylinder. Those things run a lot smoother than like the 4 cylinders. I got a buddy with pretty much the same airplane, and I've ridden around with him, and it's quiet, it's smooth. And I'm like, why did we ever cut these other 2 cylinders off? I mean, 145 horsepower. Believe me, I am well aware of your maybe on a good day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what are some of the downsides of that carburetor?
Well, it's less efficient, doesn't produce as much power as a fuel injected would, and then it's also susceptible of carburetor icing as well.
Okay. How would you notice carburetor icing?
A gradual descent of RPMs.
Okay. Now, what's your solution? Like, let's say you start building up carburetor icing. What are you going to do?
Pull carb heat.
Awesome. What are you going to expect to happen the moment you pull carb heat?
It's probably going to be running a little bit rougher for a little bit, but then over time, with all of everything that's going inside the engine from it being de-iced, it's going to run a little bit better after a while.
Awesome. Awesome. When would you turn that carb heat off?
Probably whenever it's I wouldn't say right whenever it's running better, but probably leave it in for another 30 seconds or so, and then I turn it off.
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, if I'm starting to build up carb icing, this is my personal, there's nothing in your POH that tells you one way or the other. I'm just trying to see what your, where your thought process is. So I'm not necessarily saying that you're wrong. I'm going to leave it on until I land.
Oh,
Unless
okay.
I'm like very clear out of icing conditions or out of the carb ice range. Where would you start to expect carburetor icing? Like
up higher in higher altitudes or colder climates, or not really even colder climates, since I guess it can build up in the high humidity and still good temperatures.
Yeah, so I mean, you could expect carburetor icing, anywhere from around 50% humidity. Obviously, the higher the humidity, the greater the chance. Up to like 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sure.
And that's a pretty wide range of possibility for carburetor icing. It's a little concerning, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So obviously, you've got to put oil in this thing. How much oil does this thing carry?
The maximums on it is 8. We like to keep it a little above the six line. That's where it runs best.
Awesome. Now, what's the purpose of oil?
That's to clean out the engine. It's also used to lubricate, protect it.
Right, anti-corrosive, cooling.
Yes, exactly.
Cooling. Don't forget cooling. Right, it's really the only thing that keeps our engine cool. Right. Now, talking about your fuel system, right? What's the difference between using your primer and just pumping the throttle?
Well, the primer that goes straight. The diagram it shows straight going into the intake manifold, and then the throttle. I mean, that would just kind of leak out, and that would be more susceptible to fires, I would say.
Awesome.
Well, you can also over prime it, but
Yep. Awesome. It's amazing. It's great that you know that. A lot of students, they look at that fuel diagram and they're like, this is hieroglyphics to me. I don't know what's going on. So they don't really get like, hey, what's going on? Like, why do I need to use the primer? It's great that you know that it definitely increases the risk of a fire. Now, heaven forbid a fire does happen, but if it does, what are you going to do when you go to start it? Let me give that a little bit more context. Okay. When you go to start, you start noticing a fire. What are you going to do?
Well, if the engine does crank over and it does start, I'm going to hold it to probably 17 to 1800 RPMs, just kind of try and suck in all the fires I can. And then if it doesn't start, then I'm going to just keep cranking as well, just to kind of get the airflow going in, to try and suck out the air or the fire as well.
All right. Awesome. Now, am I going to go fly this airplane if I just noticed it caught fire?
No.
No, we're gonna shut it down and definitely inspect it. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. There is no real emergency section in this POH. This is hilarious. That's what I've been over here like scrolling. I'm like, there's no way that there's no emergency section in this POH. Awesome. Well, given that there's no emergency section, we'll go over just kind of the basic ones that everybody should know. How do you recover from a spin?
Well, go to power idle, the aileron's neutral. Um, uh, Man, I'm kind of going blank, but the rudder in the opposite direction of which ones it's fighting you, and then the elevator, well, forward because you're wanting to try and build up the airspeed again, or really just trying to pitch downwards, and then you pull back up at a certain time. So I kind of say pitch forward, but then also pitch back up.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's elevator briskly forward. You're trying to break the stall. And I know in your airplane, have you done spins in your airplane?
No.
No. Most of the time, a Cessna, like the spin recovery is let go and tie your shoe. If we're gonna be honest, it's a very stable airplane. It's let go and let it do it. But don't actually do that. You know, especially anybody in the comments as well. Like, don't like this is not actual instruction when it comes to like it's a joke. It's hyperbole. Okay. But if you do end up actually stuck in the spin, when you finish the spin, you're falling like this. Like when you stop the rotation, you're coming down like this. This is a little exaggerated, probably a little bit more like this, but you've still got like somewhere like a 70-degree angle of attack. I need to reduce the angle of attack. It's less about building up airspeed. Obviously, I need airspeed, but it's more about a reduction of angle of attack, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've got obviously some airspeed limitations. We've got some other limitations in the airplane as well, but we do have some airspeed limitations. What speed should I just never exceed in this aircraft?
It's 139 knots is what it shows.
Okay, so yours has been updated to knots?
It has 160 miles per hour.
Okay.
For that.
Now, is there an airspeed indicator that reads both in that aircraft?
There is. We don't use it though.
Okay. This
We
thing's...
have
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. We have two G5s and we have a 430 as well.
Awesome. That's what I was about to ask. Has this thing been upgraded to G5s?
Yep.
And it has, right? And given that G5 technically can't be used as a primary airspeed indicator, you've still got your backup, and that one is the one that reads what the POH or what technically the operator's manual shows. Awesome. Now, what is the bottom of the white arc depicting on your airspeed indicator? Not necessarily what speed, but like let's just say in any airplane, what does the bottom of the white arc show you?
That's the stalling speed or the steady flight in a landing configuration, I believe. Or the
Yep.
Yeah, I would say landing configuration, yeah.
Yep. 1G stall speed in landing configuration.
Yeah.
All right. A lot of people call it it's called VSO. So people call it like V shit out or stuff out. Right. Awesome. And I mean, just want to make sure I'm looking at this one correctly. Right. Awesome. Now, what would be some of the benefits of shifting my CG to its aft limit?
Aft, we'd be able to rotate rather than if it would be a 4. I mean, it would be less stable.
Yeah, I mean, so does the tail generate lift or downforce?
Does the tail generate?
Yep, the tail.
I would say it would produce downforce.
It does produce downforce. So I'm going to open up Microsoft Paint, and I got to apologize. I did go to the Helen Keller School of Art. So this is, these pictures are these scribbles are always rough. There it is. There's the one I'm looking for. All right. So we're going to pretend that the picture that I draw is an airplane. All right. So there's your fuselage. There's your vertical stabilizer. There's your elevator. And then here's your wing. This is like the basic, most basic drawing of an airplane ever, but we get the point. Okay. So wing, it's going to generate lift, as we're all aware. What's the opposition to lift when it comes to the four forces of flight?
Weight.
Yeah, weight. Well, I've got this big old honking engine up here that, well, obviously weighs a lot.
Yeah.
So I need to do something. I need to be able to pick that engine up. So that's why my tail generates downforce. And I mean, if you have a canard driven airplane, it's a little different, but you generate downforce. When I generate downforce or lift, when I generate a lifting force, no matter its direction, what else do I generate? There's two kinds of it.
Can you repeat that once more?
So when I'm generating lift, when I induce lift, what else do I induce?
Drag.
I induce drag, right? So if my CG is way up here at the front of the airplane, right? If my CG is way up there at the front of the airplane, my tail has to generate a lot more downforce, right? And since it has to generate a lot more downforce to counteract that, I'm going to be generating more drag, slowing the airplane down. The engine is going to have to fight against all that excess drag. So if I move my CG, back here, back here, my tail now only has to generate a little bit of downforce.
Okay.
And since my tail is only generating a little bit of downforce, it's only generating a little bit of drag. And since I'm only generating a little bit of drag, what do I get more of? Cruise speed, fuel economy, right? So what are some of the benefits of an aft CG? Higher cruise speed, better fuel economy, greater range, right?
Okay.
Does CG stay put during your flight?
No, it could shift.
It could definitely shift. So we need to make sure, right, when we're doing our weight and balance, our zero fuel weight and our takeoff weight CG is still within the limitations. I know when I fly my airplane, I have to put my father-in-law in the back seat because takeoff, it's okay for him to be in the front seat, but as soon as we burn 10 gallons of gas, we're outside of CG limits.
Wow.
Yeah. My airplane's kind of weird though. So like a Cessna's, their CG range is so big and they're well within it. It's kind of ridiculous how stable that airplane is. Awesome. I'm happy with your understanding of the POH. You did it's a short POH, so just keep that in mind when you start moving to like other airplanes and you start is airlines your eventual end game?
Yes, sir.
All right, so just keep that in mind. This airplane is a lot simpler than any other airplane you're going to train in, unless you've got like a 1961 Seminole. Then it's just going to be two Cessnas squished together. Okay. But yeah, just keep that in mind. I mean, even my airplane from 84, its POH is, it's a disaster, but it's also, about 200, 300 pages. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, the next bit of questions aren't necessarily going to be specific to your airplane. We can obviously use your airplane as an example, but they're just going to be kind of general, like, hey, do you know how to operate as a pilot? Because remember, when you get that green, private pilot certificate, it's not private pilot certificate in a 1960 Cessna 172. It's anything that the gear stays down, the prop stays fixed, and the flaps, you can have flaps, right? Nothing more than 200 horsepower, etc. So, what documents need to be in your aircraft for just a normal VFR day flight?
I would need the airworthiness certificate, the registration, the operation manual, and then weight and balance. And also with this plane, it has to have the supplement cards since it has the G5s and 430, and placards as well.
Awesome. I love that you got all of them. Now, that airworthiness certificate, does it ever expire?
Not as long as you keep it up to date with the maintenance records.
Okay. So, what do I need to do to this airplane to make sure that it stays airworthy?
I have to get the altimeter check, the VOR, get 100-hour and annual, recheck the ELT transponder, and then also the static system.
Okay. Now, my airplane, the VOR, last time I checked the VOR, it was like 30 degrees off, so I can't use that thing anymore. So I don't bother checking it. Is my airplane not airworthy?
I would say it's not airworthy. Yeah.
Okay. So the VOR only needs to be
Oh
checked.
well, isn't that IFR?
It's IFR, or if I intend on using it as a sole form of navigation.
Okay.
Right. So airplane's airworthy. I know we use this Aviate acronym, right? And that Aviate acronym is like, hey, what do I need to do to keep an airplane airworthy? For your school, obviously, Aviate, you want to go through that whole acronym, or else the airplane's pretty much useless to the school. But my personal airplane, right? Even the ELT isn't technically required as long as I'm, if I'm providing flight training within 50 miles of the intent, or it's either 50 or 25 miles from the point of departure. Should I go fly around without an ELT? God, no. But what I'm getting at is that the lack of inspection doesn't necessarily ground the airplane, right? Is there anything else that I might need to do to an airplane to make sure that it stays airworthy?
I'm sure there is.
Awesome. You've heard of airworthiness directives, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. All right. Don't forget about airworthiness directives. Now, Cessna sent you, let's say you own this airplane, and Cessna, they mailed you a service bulletin. Do you have to do that?
Yeah.
So service bulletins are recommendations from the manufacturers. They're not required. Your insurance is going to hang you out to dry if you don't do it. But service bulletins are just recommendations. Most airworthiness directives do start as service bulletins, but the big difference between an airworthiness directive and a service bulletin is really that a service bulletin's not required.
Okay.
All right. Now here's the thing. If my aircraft manufacturer sent me a service bulletin saying, hey, work on this airplane and do this thing, I'm going to do it. I don't want to die. Right? Logically, they're required. Legally, Now, you said this airplane needs a 100-hour inspection. You're receiving instruction in it, right? So you know that it needs a 100-hour inspection. What else needs 100? Why else would I need to do a 100-hour inspection on my airplane?
If it's for hire.
All right. 91409 Bravo gets a little bit more into the details on exactly what for hire means in the context of a 100-hour inspection. Carriage of passengers for compensation or hire, or carriage of student if the flight school provides the instructor and the airplane. So compensation or hire is a little vague, right? Because I can do aerial photography, I can do banner towing, I can do pipeline patrol, I can do a lot of things that don't require a 100-hour inspection, but they're still for compensation or hire. Okay. All right. So it's great. Aviate acronym. You're not going to fail with the way that you went through it. You know that those are the inspections. That follow-up question on ADs, definitely. Though, hey, ADs need to be complied with. Are there any ADs on your airplane?
Well, I know there's that one for the seat rails for the seat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's about it. There might be some other things. You might have like a strut attachment AD that requires an inspection of your strut attachment. I know there's some Cessnas out there for that. Awesome. Now, let's say you walk up to this airplane, right? And your G5 just won't power on. Circuit breaker's not popped. Battery's working. Airplane starts up just fine. But the top G5, it just won't turn on. Is this airplane airworthy?
I would just switch G5s. Just put that one down the other one.
All right. Let's say both of them are busted. Let's say neither of them will power on. For some reason, I don't know. They just, you set the airplane out in the sun too long and the screen's cooked. I don't know if that's, I really doubt the G5s will actually fry like that, but we'll just use that as an example, right? So
I would say it's still airworthy because it's the secondary option of choice to use.
Okay, awesome. Now, let's just say there's another piece of equipment that's inoperative. How do you know that the airplane's airworthy? What are you going to look through?
The minimum equipment list.
Does your plane have a minimum equipment list?
I don't believe so, but
No, it doesn't, right? So what else might you look through?
probably go to 91, 113,
213.
213. Yes. Yeah.
All right. So what is 91? I mean, it's awesome. You know where to check, right? Problem is have you actually read 91, 213?
Yeah, it kind of just goes over and tells you to go to 91, 205.
Yep. It tells you to start at 91, 205. 91, 205. What is that telling you to check?
It tells you all the VFR required instruments in the day and night.
Yep. VFR day, night. It also shows you like IFR and stuff. Like required instruments are in 91, 205. Now, let's say whatever's broken isn't in 91, 205. What else are you going to check?
Maybe the maintenance records has something about some type of inoperative equipment.
So 91, 213 continues on past 91, 205, and it tells you to check airworthiness directives, right? That's one thing that it tells you to check, because if I come up to the airplane, that little seatbelt rail thing that it's got, that thing's not working. Well, it's not part of 91, 205, so I should be good, right? Nope. Airworthiness directives disagree. Let's say, I had a buddy that bought a Cessna and he LS swapped it. He took out that Continental and he put an LS6 in it. Is that airplane airworthy? No.
No, not quite yet.
No, because the type certificate sheet doesn't approve the airplane for an LS6. So that's the next thing I'm going to check. Does the type certificate data sheet require this piece of equipment? Right? Okay. Next thing I'm going to check is my supplemental type certificates. So those little supplemental type certificates you got because of those G5s and that Garmin 430. Yeah, you need to make sure that like there's nothing in those that says you need a certain piece of equipment. My airplane has an STC for vortex generators. You know what vortex generators are?
No.
No, they're these little things that sit on the leading edge of the wing. They help bring high energy air down into low energy boundary layers so that you can generate a lot more lift at lower air speeds. Like my stall speed's like 38. My prop stalls before my wing stalls. It's ridiculous. But if I'm missing 4 vortex generators, my airplane's not airworthy.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I can miss 3, but if I'm missing 4, airplane's done. All right. Until they just glue on. So it's not that hard to replace them, but that's not part of 91-205. Sure. Right. It's not in the POH. And the last place I'm going to check is my KOEL. Okay. My kinds of equipment operation list. Your POH doesn't have one. Okay. A KOEL is like the kinds of operation, right? Day VFR, night VFR, IFR night, water, right? And it says, hey, we think that this airplane needs this equipment as well. Okay. I think there's a diamond that requires an attitude indicator at night. Is that a required piece of equipment normally by 91-205?
No.
No. So 91-213, that's where we're going to start. 91-213 tells you to check an MEL. Do you have an MEL? Yes or no? No? All right. Then we're going to 91-205. Is this broken piece of equipment part of 91-205? No? Okay. Then we're continuing on. We're going to check ADs, the TCDS, the STCs, and the KOEL. Okay. So it's awesome. Hey, I don't need the G5s. They're nice. They're pretty. They're expensive. Believe me, I'm about to order some. I hate seeing the price.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But it's nice that that they're not required, but why are they not required? Okay. Because I'm assuming at one point you want to buy your own airplane, right?
For sure. Oh yeah.
So knowing exactly how to check whether or not your airplane's airworthy is great, instead of having to run to the mechanic and going, hey mechanic, is my airplane not airworthy? And he's going to go, don't you have a private pilot's license? Or don't you have a pilot's license? Shouldn't you know these things? Then he's going to charge you $115 an hour. So, do you need a landing light?
At nighttime, yes.
Okay, for hire.
For hire.
Yep. So, yeah, as a school, obviously, but and that one, the phraseology isn't carriage of passengers, flight school, blah blah blah. It just straight up says for compensation or hire. So even cargo operators need a landing light. Okay, so it's different from the 100-hour. Awesome. Now, you passed your private pilot's license, which is awesome. Congratulations. Yay. I think I have a. Now, what can you do now that you couldn't do before?
Well, I can fly with passengers. I can tow gliders as long as I have 100 logged hours with proper flight training and instruction. I can be a salesman of a plane for 200 hours. I can fly for charitable events, do search and rescue missions.
All right.
Yeah, not too much more than that.
All right. Bravo. You can go into Bravo without
Oh,
an
in the
endorsement.
Bravo, yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. Now, let's say your mom comes to visit you. I don't know if you live with your mom or what have you. I don't know. Let's say she comes, you're not living with your parents, and you pass your private pilot certificate, and your mom's like, "Oh, dear Lord, my baby's a pilot. I'm going to come visit him." Oh. And she flies out to like your closest Bravo airport, and she goes to Hertz rental car, has a miserable experience because Hertz is a crumbling company that doesn't know how to do the basic thing of rent cars out. Fight me, Hertz. And she drives out to you, and she's like, "Oh, dear Lord, my baby, he's a pilot now. Oh my God." And you take her up for a flight. She's losing her mind. You actually have to unplug her headset because she's just like gushing and oohing and on the entire time. And when you guys get on the ground, she's like, "You know what? I'm just gonna return my rental car out here, and you can just fly me to the closest Bravo airport, and I'll just get on my flight from there." Is that okay?
No, that's not okay.
Okay, why wouldn't that be okay? Can you explain?
It has to do with the common purpose. I wasn't planning on going there.
Awesome, right? You got to have a common purpose. Now, let's say, you guys plan on going to lunch or going shopping or what have you that day, and then, she gets on a different airplane than your airplane. It's fine, right? Now, let's say you've got a buddy that's got like White Sox tickets, all right? And he's like, "Yo, you give me a ride to the White Sox game, I'll give you one of these tickets." Is that okay? You now have a common purpose. You're both going to the White Sox game.
I'd say so.
It's the fact that he's giving you the ticket for the ride. That's
compensation part.
Yeah. All right. Now, if your buddy's like, "Hey, we got White Sox tickets. Why are we driving? Why don't we just fly?" It's a little different, right? He's not giving you a ticket. Okay.
Okay.
So it really just all depends on what the text messages say. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Awesome. Now, let's get into some airspace. So we talked about Bravo airspace. You're now allowed into Bravo airspace. Let's say that you did that. You wanted to go to a White Sox game, and you flew to Chicago O'Hare, and they let you park somehow, and now you can get an Uber and whatnot. What's the VFR requirements for you to go to O'Hare? Don't actually try to go to O'Hare. They're just going to tell you to hold until you run out of gas, and then you're going to go somewhere else. You're not actually going to get in.
And the Bravo airspace is 3 statute miles clear of clouds.
Awesome. Now, let's say you go to this, you go to O'Hare, you land, you go to your White Sox game, take me out to the ball game, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. Either way. But the weather turns to crap while you're, watching the White Sox. And the weather, a little bit of rain moves in, drops the visibility down to 2 miles. And there's about 2,000-foot ceilings, but you can see some blue sky in a little bit. You got the weather from Midway, which is just right next door, and they're showing VFR, but Chicago's showing, IFR with these 2,000-foot ceilings and 2-mile visibility. Are you stuck?
Could request a special VFR.
Yeah, you definitely could. Let's say the game went into like 12 innings because nobody scored a dang thing, and now it's like 9:00 at night. Can you still do a special VFR?
No, because I'd have to have IFR ratings for that.
Awesome. But if you've got an IFR rating and it's IFR, just
Yeah.
file an IFR flight plan. All right. Now let's get a little bit into some aerodynamics. What are flaps for?
Flaps, they allow your descent without increasing airspeed, but it also increases lift while you're taking off. So to descend and also to lift.
All right. So how do they generate more lift? Like what's happening to the wing to make it generate more lift at lower airspeeds?
It's just pushing wind onto where the flaps extend, just pushing that down, raising the plane, getting out of ground effect.
It's increasing your angle of attack,
Yes.
right? What is angle of attack?
It's the relative wind with the wing chord line.
Okay, so what is chord line?
Chord line's the I could draw it with my finger.
Okay, yeah. What's up? Yeah. So it's a straight line from the leading edge to the trailing edge. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So when I drop my flaps down, what happens to my chord line? It goes down too, increasing my angle of attack, or the tail of the chord line goes down. The nose stays rigid. But yeah, so I'm increasing my angle of attack now. Now I'm getting more lift, right? I'm also increasing my upper camber. A wing with a lot of upper camber generates lift at low air speeds. Have you ever seen like a paraglider?
Yes.
You've seen their wings, right? Their wings are like super deep. Like their wings inflate. Like it's ridiculous. They have a lot of upper camber. That's why they can generate lift to keep keep their, them and their little engine strapped to their back aloft at like 20 knots. Right? It was funny. There's a guy up near me that had a paraglider, and he took off and like went somewhere and hung out and then tried to get home, but there was a headwind and he ended up having to land and just walk because he couldn't get it. Yeah, because there was a 20 knot headwind. And his cruise speed was like 25, so he's like, I'm doing 5. Like I could walk faster than this. Awesome. Now, you brought up ground effect. What is ground effect?
Ground effect. Well, I guess I shouldn't have brought that up. I guess that's the part where I need to shut up, isn't it?
And a lot of students, they've been doing pretty good because it's obvious that y'all are watching these videos. But what is ground effect?
Well, ground effect is what's beneath. It's half the length of the airplane if it's tilted, pretty much. But it's allowing you to generate more speed and lift until you get out of the ground effect, and then you got nothing.
Okay, I mean it's within one wing length of the ground, right? Or half the airplane, unless you're in like some weird airplane. Either way, but it's within one wing span of the ground. And what's happening is I've got low pressure on top of the wing, high pressure beneath the wing, right? Relatively high pressure beneath the wing, right? So when those two meet at the wingtip, what happens? I get some little wingtip vortices, right?
Okay, yes, yeah.
Right. So if I'm looking at the back of my airplane and I have low pressure up here, high pressure up here, when I reach the tip, what ends up happening is the high pressure kind of spills over and hits the top of the wing, causing drag. Okay. But if I am close to the ground, right? If I'm within ground effect, that high pressure gets squished out. It's almost like if you just smash a tube of toothpaste and it squishes it out. So it gets pushed away. So you end up pushing these wingtip vortices out here. That's why once you leave ground effect, you end up getting them on top of the wing. Okay. So that's how ground effect is working. Reduction of drag, increased lift. Okay. When would I use ground effect to my benefit?
During what type of takeoffs?
Yeah, sure. What type?
Like short field?
Short field, soft field.
I guess yeah.
Right. Short field, I don't know if I guess with
you're usually Yeah, I was gonna say because you're trying to just get up high as possible, so you're not really getting into the ground effect.
Yeah, and I mean your airplane, given its 145 horsepower on a good day, um, depending on what your difference is between what you can climb out at and what you end up in ground effect at, it's up to you. A lot of people say, when it comes to short field, just keep the nose down until you end up at a climb speed. But depending on your airplane's power and your airplane's rolling resistance with the wheels on the ground, it might be beneficial to pop up and then stay low. But go with what your instructor has taught you. Okay. So what's a stall?
Well, is when you exceed the critical angle of attack.
Okay, and what happens to airflow around the wing once I exceed that critical angle of attack?
On the top of the wing, it gets disrupted, so the airflow just kind of overlaps it. It doesn't have any air creating the lift.
Okay, so am I just done generating lift?
No, it's still generating lift.
Awesome. There's some, right? It's just not enough to keep the aircraft aloft. What's going to happen to my stall speed as I increase bank?
It's going to stay the same.
Have you ever done accelerated stalls?
No.
Right. So my stall speed's going to increase as I increase my bank. Okay. Because remember, when you do steep turns, how does it feel? You get a little squished into your seat, right?
Yeah.
Well, the airplane feels the same way. Okay. So the airplane's fighting that centrifugal force outward. So it's effectively increasing the weight of the airplane. What happens to my stall speed as I increase weight? Goes up.
Yeah.
Right. I know your airplane doesn't have a big enough weight range to actually impact it meaningfully. Okay. Because your published stall speed is at max gross 1G level flight. Okay. So as I increase bank, all that centrifugal force trying to push me out of the turn is also pulling on the wing, making that wing work harder. So your stall speed increases. If you get up to 60 degrees of bank, you end up with 2 Gs, but you end up with about a 40% increase in stall speed. Okay, so if you crank it on over to 60, your stall speed's 45-ish? Right? So if you crank it all the way over to 60, you're going to be looking at a 60 knot stall speed, which is still pretty low, right?
Yeah.
What could happen if I stall uncoordinated, though?
Gotta put it into a spin.
I could definitely put it into a spin. Do you know the 4 phases of a spin?
The entry phase, incipient, fully developed, and the recovery.
Yeah, hopefully, right? How do you know you're in the fully developed phase of a spin?
I would say, you really wouldn't because, you're kind of just spinning, so you really wouldn't know what's going on at that point. But it's really whenever you go 3 or 4 spins, I believe.
Okay, so that's generally when the fully developed starts, but just the fact that you did 3 to 4 spins doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a fully developed spin. So depending on which direction you're spinning, right? If you're spinning to the left because your pitot tube's on the left, your airspeed is going to stabilize at just below stall speed. Okay. Your rate of rotation is going to stabilize and your rate of descent is going to stabilize.
Oh, okay.
At that point, fully developed. Okay.
Wow.
Now, if you're spinning to the right, it's going to be just above stall speed because that's where your pitot tube is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, we talked about the recovery. Awesome. Now, what is adverse yaw? When I bank over, right? If I'm just using ailerons and I'm too lazy, I end up doing this little nonsense, right? The nose keeps wandering around outside the turn. Why does that happen?
I would think from the upper wing, it's still generating the lift, and so it's kind of just cranking the plane into the opposite direction,
right?
Creating more lift in the downward wing.
Right. And when I generate more lift, I also induce more drag. Right.
Yeah.
What's the other type of drag?
Parasite drag.
Okay. And which one of those increases with airspeed?
Induced.
So it's going to be parasitic, right? Because the reason I generate more drag So I generate induced drag with the generation of lift, right? And it's less about the generation of lift and it's more about the angle of attack, more about the asking of generation of lift. So when I ask for a lot of lift at low airspeeds, I generate more drag. But as I start to lower that nose and increase the airspeed, right? I don't have a high angle of attack. So I don't have as high of induced drag. Okay. But parasitic drag is the one that increases with airspeed. That's why, Bugatti got their car up to like 160 miles an hour with only, like 800 horsepower, and they had to go to 1,000 to get to the remaining. I forget exactly what it was, but either way, it's the reason cars have top speeds, right? Because they just can't overcome the parasitic drag at those top speeds or at those higher end speeds. That's why your fuel economy goes down when you're doing 90 down the highway as opposed to the speed limit of 65.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. What causes parasitic drag, or what can I do to an airplane to try and reduce its parasitic drag?
Well, there's the 3 types: the skin, form, and interference drags. So, you could just start taking the rivets off the plane if you want to.
Flush cut rivets or flush, surface flush rivets. Those are an awesome option.
The cleaning, waxing of a plane.
Exactly right. You see that big old bee that you hit 3 weeks ago that you haven't cleaned off the leading edge? There's 2 knots right there.
Yep.
Awesome. So I need rudder when I take off and when I climb. Why? Like what's happening to this airplane? Why do I need to keep giving in right rudder? Why does my instructor keep beating on me with a book telling me right rudder, right rudder?
It has the turning tendencies.
Okay. And what are those?
There's a torque tendency. There's the gyroscopic procession, slipstream, and torque, gyroscopic, slipstream. I know there's that one more.
Okay, P factor or asymmetric propeller loading is what I've heard one student call it, right? So we'll go for the difficult ones. I mean, torque and spiraling slipstream is pretty straightforward, right? For every action, there's an equal yet opposite reaction, and spiraling slipstream, propellers make tornadoes. The tornado smacks the left side of your tail, pushing your airplane to the left. Really straightforward. Yeah. What is P factor? Describe to me P factor.
P factor. I just went over this one, and I need to go through all of them in my head real quick. I'm gonna say I don't know. I don't want to get myself in a bundle.
All right. Well, let's get into it, right? So P factor really happens when I'm at a high angle of attack. So my airplane, it's pointed up at the sky right here because I'm trying to climb. Okay. So this is my relative wind. My hand is the relative wind. My prop is cutting down like this on the descending side. You see that big angle between the relative wind and the prop?
Yes.
All right. Now let's compare that to the upwind side. The upwind side, here's my relative wind, and there's my upward blade. There's a whole lot shallower angle of attack on the upwind blade than there is the ascending blade than there is the descending blade. The descending blade has a greater angle of attack when I am at a high pitch angle or a high angle of attack, meaning that the descending blade is going to generate more thrust than the ascending blade. That's why as you keep slowing down, right, you notice you need more and more right rudder because you keep increasing that angle of attack on that descending blade.
That's right.
Right. Now, what about gyroscopic procession?
Gyroscopic procession is whenever the air hits the top of the propeller, and with the laws of motion, so the 90 degrees after that, that's where it kind of just shifts the airplane in the opposite direction.
Okay, so isn't wind hitting my propeller all over the place? That's kind of how it works, right? It'd be a little weird if only one spot of if only when the blade was pointing up, I generated thrust.
Yeah.
So I don't think the airplane would ever fly if I was only generating thrust when the airplane's pointing up. It's more about, remember, your propeller's attached to the airplane. It's a gyro that's impacted by how you move the airplane around. So if I'm in an airplane and I've got a big old gyro on the nose of it and I pitch that airplane up, I have now applied a torque to that gyro. So it's felt 90 degrees in the direction of rotation. It's a right turning tendency when you're taking off. The reason they refer to it as a left turning tendency in the book is because it's in the context of a tail dragger, right? So if I've got an airplane that rides around on its tail like all the cool kids do, right? When I go to pick that nose up, it's like I'm pushing on the top of that propeller. So it's now going to yaw me off to the left.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's get a little bit into some aeromedical factors, right? We obviously need to make sure that we're safe to operate an aircraft. What are you going to do to ensure that you're safe to operate an aircraft? Like you're not suffering from anything. You are physically ready to operate an airplane.
Okay, yeah. So there's that I'm safe checklist. So to make sure that there's no illnesses, medication kind of goes along with that. Medication as long as it's FAA approved, and if there's any stress, the alcohol, fatigue, and eating in motion.
Okay, so you say medication. Let's say I got maybe a little bit of sniffles, right? I'm gonna take some Dayquil because that's a daytime sneezing, sniffling, cough, sick time medication. Is Dayquil okay?
No.
Okay. How do you know?
It has drowsiness into it, but I would just go onto the FAA.gov just to see if it's approved.
Awesome.
Medicine.
Now, the FAA.gov website, it's rough. I'm just gonna be honest. It's rough to navigate. They want you to give them like the Christian name of the freaking medication. I always grab the wrong one. So yeah, there's your POH. Yeah. Have you ever been to AMAS medication database?
I have not, no.
No. All right. So it says read disclaimer before searching. What it really just says is this is not a government website. So just keep that in mind. But I can type in Dayquil. And obviously it says, no, I need to wait 48 hours. Okay. But as you can see, it's a little bit more searchable than the FAA's guidelines. Okay. So like, here's the FAA, like do not fly medication list. Yeah, that's real helpful. Okay. And then I've got like this over the counter medication. And again, it's not really, it's not telling you specifically what medication. And again, it's asking for like NSAIDs and, they want you to give them the full on name. But AMAS over here, you can search it just like you would Google, right? So I can search, I don't know. What's that one for athlete's foot? Lotrimin? Isn't that what it is?
I have no clue.
I don't either. I don't know. LOT. I don't know. Let's see what that one is. Nope, not allowed. Possible blurry vision during flight. I don't know what it is, but I know I can't take it. Okay. So that's why I just recommend this one, is because the FAA's one is a little hard to digest sometimes. So AMAS, I just Google it, AMAS medication database. Just so you've got that resource, because I've seen students where it's like they're taking like a topical, like an acne cream. It doesn't say anything about drowsiness on the bottle. Okay, they're just like, I got pimples. I want to take an acne cream. No, not allowed. 48. Wow. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was like, but by searching the FAA's, just their little document, it's a little harder to get into it, right? Or it's a little harder to make sure. Now, what other checklist might you kind of run through to kind of help you with some aeronautical decision making to make sure that there's nothing trying to push you into this flight?
As in,
Like,
like I would just make sure with the weather, I would go, well, yeah, just really go with the weather, saying how I feel that day. I guess that kind of goes along with the I'm safe.
okay. I mean, we've got the PAVE checklist, right? Pilot,
We do.
aircraft, environmental factors, external pressures, right?
Yep.
So running through that is a really good way to make sure there's nothing trying to push me into this flight. What I usually do is I ask myself, does this sound like the beginning of an NTSB incident report?
Yeah.
And if it does, I'm like, I think we might want to figure out some way to mitigate this risk. Okay. I know everyone jokes and laughs at the aeronautical decision making section of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, but a risk matrix is really it's a really important tool to like learn how to use. I know me and my buddies went camping the other day in all our airplanes. We flew up to Washington Island, and like the weather might get bad the next day, but it was like rain, not like thunderstorms, right? So even sitting around the campsite, we're like, all right, well, let's do a risk matrix. What's the likeliness of this incident happening? It's like, oh, well, weather says it's a 50-50 shot of rain. I was like, okay, so it's kind of likely. Now, what's the severity of the outcome if it does rain? He's like, oh, well, then we'll have to land in Sturgeon Bay and I'll have to drive to work. It's like, okay, so no one's going to die? All right. I think we're good. I think we're in the green area. Okay. So I know everyone laughs at those risk matrices going like, when would I ever use this? You use them, right? Now let's get into hypoxia. What are the different kinds of hypoxia?
There's hypoxia, hypemic, stagnant, and hemotoxic, hemotoxic,
Histotoxic.
histotoxic.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Hemo is like blood. Histo is like
Yes.
history of toxic. Is the way that I remember it, right?
Okay.
Now, let's say you've got a buddy that, well, let's just be honest, they're a little overweight. Their feet get tingly. What might they be experiencing while you're out flying around?
We say hypemic. Well, I guess that's more carbon monoxide. So probably probably stagnant.
It is definitely stagnant hypoxia, right? Because they're sitting down and, the seat in the Cessna could be pinching their legs because, I mean, they've got like a metal bar that runs across the front of them. And, your airplane's pretty old. I don't know if it's been restored, but if it hasn't, the foam in there is probably pretty broken down, right? So, somebody that's got a couple extra pounds might squish that foam all the way down, and now their legs resting on that bar. Now their feet are getting tingly. It's a version of stagnant hypoxia. Everyone goes straight to G forces when they hear stagnant hypoxia. It's like, come on. Are you going to pull enough G's in your Cessna 172 to go to black out? No. Like, why are we using that as the go-to example, right?
Yeah.
Technically in the utility category, your aircraft can pull like 4.4 Gs, and I get sleepy at 4.2. So like, but yeah. Awesome. Now let's get into some sectional and navigation nonsense. Okay. Now, do you have like maybe a route that your examiner might send you on, or you got like a rough idea on where you might end up? I am always clicking.
So I have no examiners near my area. I might have to fly out of state.
Oh, that is rough. Oof. Well, with that in mind, then I'll give you one. Oh, what was this one way out here? Is this it? No, that's not what I wanted. Where'd it go? Did they close it? Oh, no, there it is. Okay. I was like, they didn't close this airport, did they? All right. So here's a route that I used to give a lot of students, right? It was India Whiskey Alpha to Stafford. So Williams Gateway to SAD. And they got really sad when they didn't pass. No. So this is a very common route that I've seen in Arizona that examiners like to give people. Now, I'm departing India Whiskey Alpha, this airport right here.
Okay.
What equipment do I need?
You would, since you're in the mode C veil of the class Bravo, you would need the ASB out and a mode C transponder.
Okay.
And with you being inside the Delta, you would need the two-way communication with air traffic control.
Awesome. So since we are departing this airport, let's make sure we understand all of this fun little stuff up here. What does this little star mean?
I'm not quite sure of the star, no.
Tower? CT, control tower, 120.6.
Is it just the
part-time
rotating beacon then?
No.
Oh,
part-time.
okay.
Tower's not open all the time. All right. Is there any runway here that is not standard pattern? And if so, what direction or what runways and what direction would I be turning?
Yeah, 1-2 right for right pattern.
Anything else?
Oh, and 3-0 right.
Yep, 3-0 right and 1-2 right. Roughly how long is the longest runway?
10,400 feet.
Awesome. What is this star right here?
That's the rotating beacon.
That is the rotating beacon. Now, why is this one right here and this one over top of the little circle? Like, what is it?
I believe it's because the star, it's on the control tower, and that one's not on the tower itself. It's like in a field, I'm assuming.
No, so they're both technically on the tower. I've been to these airports; they're both on the tower. This is showing where it is in relation to the runways.
Okay.
I forget why this one's a circle and why this one's a runway. Maybe I know it's got something to do with runway length, but I'm gonna be honest, I forget what runway length they're expecting or what runway length makes it so you get a circle versus a.
It's, I believe 8,069 feet.
Awesome. I'm glad you know. So I've got a couple private airports out here, right? This one, it's a filled in circle. This one's not a filled in circle. What is the difference between these fields?
The one that's not colored in is a non-defined surface. So it's could be like grass, gravel, or I guess not even, because I guess it could be even hard surface, and they just don't want you to land in there.
Well, the fact that it's private is saying, hey, pound sand unless you get clearance. But the fact that it's not filled in is saying like, hey, we don't have a defined hard surface, right? We have other than hard surface. Okay. What is this little flag right here?
It's a VFR checkpoint.
Okay. So I'm cruising along on my flight plan. Can I punch through this airspace? Do I need to plan around it? Do I need to talk to somebody?
You need to talk to someone, get some authorization to go in it, or you can check the legend, and it has a certain time that it may be active.
All right. Now, what about this one? What is this?
It's the military operating area.
Okay. Do I need a clearance to enter this?
No, just pretty much exercise extreme caution for military.
Yep. What is this one, this blue one with the dots inside of it?
Looks like a wilderness area.
Okay. And any restrictions associated with this?
They just kind of volunteer everyone, or tell everyone to fly higher than 2,000. I mean, it's not required, but kind of just better for the environment.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's Superstition Wilderness area.
That one's one where it's like, hey, stay away from there. Like there's things going on here. Like this one's the Hummingbird Spring Wilderness area. This is where a bunch of hummingbirds come to feed or to eat when they just as they just flew up from Mexico in a matter of 36 hours. So obviously if you're buzzing this, pissing off a bunch of hummingbirds that just flew 36 hours straight, they probably gonna die. Okay. So don't be a dick is really just the easiest way to do that. So would you say that this fix right here would be a good VFR point?
It'd be better, yeah. I'd probably go a little bit more further out just to make sure I'm not going in their airspace. But yeah, about there.
Awesome. So about there. All right, I like that. We're cruising along. I'd say maybe that one maybe be a good point, but again, empty circle. What's it denoting?
Yeah, it's non-defined hard surface.
Yeah, so it's very possible that there's we're gonna overfly it and not even notice it. So just keep that in mind.
I guess it has the congested area next to it though too, so you can just watch out for the city.
Yep.
On the north side.
Awesome. I like that. Continuing on. Now, why is this elevation so big? Like this one's, oh wait, that's probably the wrong. Looking for another one. Like this 8282, why is it bigger than this 6629?
It's a higher elevation, so I'm assuming it's probably just a mountaintop.
Well, it's the highest
elevation of the mountain.
Yep. Okay. I guess that was the wrong one because that's left the circle or left the grid, right? So the reason it's big and bold is it's the highest one in that grid, and there's technically a really, really big and bold one, and it's the highest one on the sectional. Okay. Then, that's probably not a bad spot. There's probably a decent spot. Now, I'm coming here. What airspace is on the ground here?
That's Gulf.
Okay. Up to what altitude?
To about 700, and then goes to Class Echo to 1799, pretty much.
Awesome. Now, I'm cruising along. I decide I go to Safford. Now I want to come down to Tucson. Tucson's my next one. What is this depicting? Why is this all white and dotted?
Sometimes it's a lake, but sometimes it's dried up.
Yep. Given Arizona recently, it's probably dry. Wait. I'd probably use this highway. I could probably follow this highway out of the mountain range. Maybe cut through here. You think that's a good idea?
That looks good.
All right. Now, if I notice that there's a 40 knot wind kind of going this direction, what might happen on this side of the mountain range?
Coming from where?
So if I've got a 40 knot wind coming from the bottom left of my screen, going to the top right of my screen, what might happen on this side, the Safford side of this mountain range?
On the east side, it might be maybe a little bit better since the mountain's blocking off the wind.
Okay. Now let's say I've got a fairly stable air mass, but it's a strong wind. So when the air mass gets disturbed, it tries to trend back to where it got disturbed from, right? So if I've got air that gets pushed up this Pinal Mountains, what's going to happen on the other side of the Pinal Mountains?
Okay, it's going to be unstable.
Well, it's
turbulent.
Well, it's not just going to be unstable. You're going to get downdrafts. You're going to get some extreme. You could get some extreme downdrafts on the other side of that mountain.
Okay.
All right. That's why I was like, "Hey, let's cut through this mountain pass." Yeah, maybe not. Maybe we should. maybe we should stay clear of that little mountain pass in the event that there is wind. right? Obviously, we're going to get a weather briefing beforehand.
Yes.
Okay. But on the leeward side of mountains, I could end up with extreme downdrafts if I've got wind, right? If I try and climb over them, I could end up with mountain waves, right?
Okay. That's good to know. I have no mountains in the state, so.
Okay. Well, I definitely recommend if you ever do want to go fly like in and or around mountains, go get some actual mountain training. Because there's a lot in the event that like you get stuck in a canyon and stuff. So don't just, pardon the pun, wing it. Now I'm flying from this area and I plan on going to Tucson, right? How do I contact Tucson to make sure that I have clearance to go into their airspace? Can you read this fine, or do I need to zoom in?
I can see it. You
right.
can contact. Well, I would contact Approach about the 20 nautical miles out, and then they would transfer me if I am allowed to the airspace to whichever runway or whichever airport.
Awesome.
that-
Yeah. You're going to contact them on Approach, right? Which is 119.4.
Correct. I can't quite tell what the airports are, though.
Oh, it's Tucson, it's KTUS, and then it's DMA, which is a military base. So you're not going to that one. You're going to Tucson. So let's say I got lost and, I end up like I completely lost my situational awareness and I end up like way down here and I accidentally cross here. What is this?
Oh, that's the ADIS, the air defense something area.
Air Defense Interdiction Zone.
Interdictions, yes.
All right. 8 is. So let's say I did this. I like got way down here and I'm like, oh, dang, this don't look right. And I just turned right back around. I'm like, oh, there's Tucson. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this and whatnot to try and get back to Tucson. What's going to happen if I just say screw it and cross this without talking to anybody?
Probably going to have some military jets coming flying your way and trying to redirect you back over.
Okay. So what does an interdiction look like?
They'll come up in front of you and rock their wings and then get you to follow them, and they'll do that hopefully a couple of times before they start shooting you down. Or I guess they might even shoot flares too.
Yeah, so what's most likely going to happen is they're going to come up on the side opposite the direction they want you to go. They're going to rock their wings, and then they're going to cross in front of you in the direction they want you to travel. If you don't follow them, they're going to do it one more time with flares, or they're going to do it with flares initially at night. Okay?
Mm.
If you don't follow them on the second try, there is no third try.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I just there is no third try. So here's the thing. If they look into the airplane and notice that you're like passed out, they're not going to shoot you down. That's happened before. There was a Helios flight that they forgot to turn the pressurization system on, and the crew passed out. The passengers passed out. The only person that was still awake was a flight attendant that noticed what was happening and got the oxygen bottle.
Jeez.
And it was actually really sad because you can see the flight attendant walking around trying to get into the flight deck. But given that they're locked, it wasn't an option, right? But they didn't shoot the airplane down. They let it just go until it ran out of gas in hopes that they eventually woke up.
Jeez.
Right.
Okay.
So, if you're in there passed out, just leaning over, they might not shoot you down. But obviously if you just white knuckling it, looking like you're flying with a mission, yeah. What frequency might they try to get a hold of you on? If you're being interdicted.
Oh, probably maybe multicom, so 122.2.
I'm gonna go to 121.5.
Oh, okay.
Right, because it's like it is an emergency to them.
True. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, what is this 15.2 right here?
It's giving you a little leeway of the highest elevation in that sector, so it's not the exact highest elevation, but it's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, so it's your maximum elevation figure. It gives you clearance. I forget exactly how much, but it gives you clearance. It ensures that if you are at that altitude, you aren't going to smack anything. What does this AOE mean?
I don't think I've ever seen that before.
All right, it's an airport of entry. It's customs.
Oh.
So if you legally crossed the ADIS, let's say you like flew down to one of these beaches with one of your rich buddies or what have you. Maybe you, if you're rich like that, I don't know. On your way back, if you don't, you're most likely going to end up going to an AOE, an airport of entry. Okay. There are certain systems in place in which like you can just fly over top of them because like you've signed up for it. They'll get you on the transponder and all that jazz and they know who you are. It's kind of like global entry, but with your own airplane. If you're really curious about it, to be honest, I don't know much about it. I'm trying to sign up for it because I live close enough to Canada that I might want to go up there. But what airspace is on the ground here?
That's a Class Echo.
Awesome. Up to?
Alpha.
Awesome. I know it sounds like a dumb question, but remember, even if it's dumb,
still a question.
Yeah. All right. I'm happy with that. Pretty decent, pretty solid understanding of what you call it. Sectional. I love it.
Sectional.
Let's go check out some weather. What are the 3 things I need for a thunderstorm?
You need moisture, unstable air, and lift.
All right. Awesome. Now, I'm here in Seattle. Can you see this?
Yes.
All right. So I'm here in Seattle. I've got a TAF. When's the lowest ceiling?
Lowest ceiling is 1500. The 1500 time, not the 1500.
Oh, okay. I don't even see
15,000. 3,500. Yes.
Awesome.
The broken layer.
Awesome. Now, what defines a what defines a ceiling?
Broken layer or an overcast.
Right. Anything over broken. Anything with thicker coverage than broken. Come on. Anything good here? No. Let's go to Chicago. All right. What's the worst weather that's probably going to happen in Chicago today?
Probably the definitely the winds are kicking up in I guess that's the temporary time from 2100 to 2300, and the thunderstorms and rain. It's heavy rain for it being a plus sign.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's probably going to be my worst weather. Pretty solid. Now, can you kind of explain to me how radiation fog happens?
Radiation fog is whenever it's generally at nighttime, whenever heat inversion happens, so the heat's coming off the ground and the cool air is kind of intercepting it.
So it's mostly when warm, moist air ends up over cool ground. It's being the ground is cooling down warm, moist air. Again, you're right. It generally happens at night, but it's less about a temperature inversion of like the upper some upper cold air. It's about the ground being cold and cooling down the air above it.
Okay.
Right. So if I have like a sea breeze, right? So because I've got a little bit of, because the ocean, right, or lakes or bodies of water cool down at a slower rate than land. So that means that the ocean is warm. So I'm going to have warm air getting pushed off of the ocean over to cool land, and it radiating that heat into the ground, trying to warm it up. But given that it's trying to warm up the ground, that it ends up cooling down to its dew point.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. And let's open image in new tab. What is the freezing level in Montana? This one's Montana, by the way.
Okay. It'd be 12,000 feet.
12,000 feet. What altitude would I expect turbulence in this area?
5,000 and lower.
Yep, 5,000 and lower. Awesome. I love it. What is the wind here?
It's light and variable.
Awesome. What about, oh, where'd it go? Here.
I would say the winds are from 078 with I guess 4 knots and negative 46 degrees Celsius.
All right. So
I'm not sure if that's
this one, if you see anything, because remember, it's broken into 6 characters. We've got direction, velocity, and temperature, right? So if I ever see a direction above 36, right, the compass only goes up to 36. It can't go any higher than that. What they do is they add 50 to it, all right, and subtract 100 from the velocity. So when I see 78, that means I need to subtract 50 from this. It's 280, and then add 100 to the velocity.
okay.
All right. So it's 280 at 104, negative 46.
Okay.
All right. I know it's a little hard to believe. You're like, wait a minute, 104? Not? Yeah. I mean, at 34,000 feet, yeah, there's probably a jet stream up there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
That makes sense.
I mean, I'm happy with weather. Other than that one little thing, definitely go over your fogs. A lot of students struggle with fog.
Yeah.
Thunderstorm was solid. Let me see. Your POH, your POH is there's not a whole lot of information in it, but you did know what was in it, right? Emergencies were fairly solid. Yeah, I mean, I'd say so far you've obviously opened the books. You've obviously been studying. I think you're going to clear up the rest of it just with the remainder of your training.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm at 28 hours. I'm pleasantly surprised. Okay. I don't know if the last 2 years when you weren't flying, you were studying to make sure that you were ready.
Not really.
No. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, good luck. I'm not worried about you passing. Given where you're at, we covered the few little things that you needed to work on. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I'd say good luck, have fun, go be a private pilot.
Thank you. Definitely. I think definitely the aerodynamics probably need to rest up on those a little bit more. For sure.
And I mean, chapter 5 in the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. Okay.
Yeah.
It's on Spotify now as an audiobook, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I'll write that down.
So, while you're in the gym or, walking to school or driving or whatnot, right? Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge is now on Spotify. So, do you have any questions for me?
Not too many. No, I wouldn't say so.
No, all right.
Just kind of just testing my knowledge with you, just see where I'm at.
Yeah, and I mean, you're doing great, right? I would
I've
definitely
never really done it with under pressure at all, so this is the first time. Because it's always just me and myself doing my own questions.
Yeah,
and of course it comes a lot quicker. But
yeah, and I mean, this is what I do with my students. I'll send them off to somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I do mock check rides, I do my best to make sure that that it's rough. I want this to be rough. And the amount of students that have come back and went, "Oh my God, the check ride was so much easier." But that's a good thing, right? I'd rather you show up prepared than unprepared, right?
Definitely.
But yeah, I say you're pretty much exactly where you're above where you need to be. So I wouldn't be too nervous, but don't let this get to your head. Obviously continue on with what you've been doing. All right.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day. As I said, this Discord that you're in, it rings right to my pocket. So if there's any questions that come up while you're going through the remainder of your studying or whatnot, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you very much.
No problem. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, sir. You too.
All right.